As promised, once again, we're joined from Washington by Congressman Keith Ellison, the Democrat of Minnesota. Great thanks, Representative. We appreciate your making it over, I understand, under some adverse physical conditions tonight.
Yeah, I'm a trooper.
Yep, we know that, sir. All right, the consensus an hour after the president ended his speech tonight was that from all respects it had the right level of anger, urgency, and in terms of an actual approach to doing something about jobs, it was at least a great first step. Is that your assessment, more or less?
Yes, it is. I think that the president has firmly placed jobs first on the national agenda. If the Republicans don't want to get with it, that shows that they're not about jobs first. I think they've amply demonstrated that already so far. But this is in front of a primetime audience where they sat stone-faced when the president was talking about getting Americans back to work. So I think the pressure's on them, and the president has definitely helped himself. Of course, there were some things in there that I found disturbing, and I don't mind talking about those things tonight. But I will say this: in the main, I was pretty happy with the president's tone and his substance, with a couple of things that we got to talk about.
All right, well, let's get those out of the way immediately while the subject is fresh. Senator Sanders, there were a couple of things he didn't like in here. He's worried about taking money out of payroll taxes that continue to fund Social Security. There are a couple of other things that have been raised. What are your complaints about that speech?
Well, again, I want to be clear that I was mostly happy with it, but let me just say that the things I was concerned about, number one, this whole dialogue about Medicare and Social Security, I don't think it belongs in a job speech. And in talking about paying for the jobs package and somehow implicating Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, I just think it doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, look, Paul Ryan handed us a present by attacking Medicare and Medicaid Social Security. Why would the president, when he's trying to pump up jobs, just sort of like give a nod to Paul Ryan? I don't think that that's a good strategy, and I don't think that's ultimately going to be successful. 52 million Americans get a Social Security check every 2 weeks, and many millions of Americans rely on Medicare. I don't think it's the right way to go. Now, look, I'm not saying I'm against any reform. I'm all in favor of letting Medicare negotiate drug prices, just like the VA does. That would be a reform. But I think he needs to get way more specific, and he shouldn't take a good message and then sort of throw a wet blanket on it with that kind of talk about Medicare and Social Security. Then another thing I thought needs some real focus is this discussion about these trade bills. I think that NAFTA has been a disaster. These FTAs with Colombia, Panama, and South Korea need much closer examination before I'm convinced that we're not going to just offshore more American jobs. I think we really need to dig onto them. The case on these kind of bills has not come in yet, and if it has come in, it shows that they're not good for American jobs. So, those two things, Social Security, Medicare, and the trade stuff, I thought the speech could have well done without, but at the same time, I definitely think that the president did a good job tonight, and I like most of what I heard, particularly the stuff about infrastructure, bank, investing in our nation's infrastructure. I'm from Minneapolis. 4 years ago, a bridge fell into the Mississippi, killed 13 Minnesotans, and injured another 100. This is not just a matter of putting people back to work. It's a matter of safety. Yep. We gotta invest in our nation's infrastructure.
Anybody who was even there with us on TV that night, and I was sitting out the whole night that night, was that there's no theory behind that when you see a bridge collapse in a major metropolitan area. Given what was put into this speech, including the things that maybe you or I were not particularly happy about, we know the Republicans could oppose anything, including sunshine. But how do you oppose a bill that is predicated on these four corners? Breaks for small businesses, improved working conditions for vets, improved infrastructure, particularly of 35,000 some odd schools that get new blackboards and new floors, by the way, and improved conditions for hastening jobs for those who've been unemployed the longest. How do the Republicans? You're in there every day with these guys. Where are they staying up all night to find out some evil way to come back and combat this, or how would you possibly combat something that's predicated on those principles and throws in a lot of the stuff the Republicans want anyway?
I think they got a real problem on their hands. I think the smartest thing for them to do is just put the American people up front like they should have been doing all along. I mean, when it comes to the Republicans, if they ever do the right thing, it's by force. They do the wrong thing by choice, particularly with this president. And so I'm hoping that that they'll just do the right thing and support this bill, since much of it is stuff that they've supported in the past. But I got a feeling they're not wise enough to do that. I got a feeling that they are going to try to subvert and undermine, because there's two reasons. One is I think they pin their election fortunes on President Obama's failure, and so they think anything they can do to obstruct him is going to somehow help them. But sadly, American people don't enter into their calculus. The other issue, however, is, look, high unemployment does not hurt some of their benefactors. I mean, high unemployment gives some of their benefactors the chance to chase in unions. It gives some of their people to tell the people who are already on the job that if they complain about wages or working conditions, that they may be out of work. I mean, sometimes high unemployment is good for some of these corporate folks who care nothing about workers but care everything about just profits. So, I mean, I think it's important that we really do face the fact, the ugly fact, that not everybody wants to bring unemployment down. Some people want a big reserve labor pool, and they want to be able to threaten in labor unions and threaten workers that if they organize, they're going to be without a job. I just think it's an ugly fact that we haven't been able to face yet, but it's true.
So the comments that Majority Leader Cantor made yesterday about how the Republicans had been trying to focus on cut and grow in his terms, but as he said, the fact is for the last 8 months we've been about cuts, implying that they had failed in terms of grow, and that is why it is imperative, he said, that all of us join together, work with the president to see how we can grow this economy. Is it your assumption that those are words that are just designed to make it seem as if they're being cooperative, and as I said to Jeff Madrick earlier, allowing the president to have a teaspoon of gas when the car needs to be fully retanked?
Well, let me tell you, I'm one of those guys who's optimistic. I say trust but verify. If they say they're all in, then get on in, and let's get this bill passed. But you know what? I'm not going to pin all my hopes and dreams on their cooperation, because if history is any guide, you know, they've been missing in action so far. I mean, they've had the majority for over 250 days and haven't passed a single jobs bill. So, I mean, how do they account for that? I mean, so look, if Cantor is now turned over a new leaf, fine. But you know, I'm not going to hold my nose waiting on it. No,
good. We're relieved on that point. Congressman Keith Ellison of Minnesota, co-chair of the Progressive Caucus. All right, take care. Thank you very much, Congressman. Have a good night.
Yes, sir.
We'll wrap this up we'll go back to what the president emailed his people at 6 o'clock, his supporters at 5 o'clock this afternoon, forgive me, Eastern time, where he said the speech will be very nice and all of that, but it depends on what you do next. We'll wrap that up with former Governor Eliot Spitzer and economist Jeff Madrick when Countdown's coverage of the president's speech resumes and concludes after this.